So thank you. Do just a little prayer of gratitude. Thank you to being, to the living source of the whole universe for being this live webinar. Thank you to all the forms and expressions of that, the infinite, diversified, multiplistic universe, multiverses of multiples of infinite beings, which are all expressions of that. Thank you to everyone here. Thank you to your own collectives, to your ancestors, to all the expressions that you have ever been and you ever will be. Thank you for blessing this live webinar with your being and for being together here tonight. And may tonight's live webinar be a deep fulfillment to everybody who is participating, both now in real time and those who will in the future. Okay. So I was thinking, when I was thinking about tonight's webinar, okay, two things. First of all, the quick overview of what is energy work for all the new people, because we do have some new people tonight. So in a nutshell, energy work or energy healing is about intelligently directing the attention in such a way as to activate or enliven wholeness, completeness, or totality in any area, in the areas of the physiology or the areas of the life that require transformation and change, that require completion. The nature of awareness or attention is that it is the part of the being of all which we control with our conscious minds. So just the mere intention, I'm going to think about the Croatian waterfalls or whatever it is, geodes or whatever, druzes, whatever you want to think about immediately, without effort, without completely spontaneously, awareness just goes on that thing. And so there's a really, really highly sensitivity in the area where consciousness meets awareness, right? That spot is where there's a sort of lively relationship between the individual and the wholeness, the individual and the source of creation. So in energy healing, what we're doing is we're kind of like bypassing a lot of things like the pills and the procedures and all that, and we're working directly with consciousness on consciousness, so that awareness is directed into the area that doesn't feel good or is unhappy, and it works like a medicine in that it reestablishes the energy frequency in that area of being that resonates with cosmic evolution, that resonates with total health potential, which resonates with your maximum success in whichever area you're applying the attention. If anybody has questions as we're going along, please feel free to ask. Meanwhile, I wanted to say that last week, or last webinar, it was kind of an advanced topic, the meeting the inside tribe, or knowing the inside tribe. And what I realized was that today's webinar, or this week's webinar, has the potential to bring a kind of a deep fulfillment to what we started in that previous webinar. But not to worry, because I would like to bring everything out in this concrete and accessible a way as possible. So focusing on that. But what we did in the previous webinar is we sort of identified where that part of ourself is. How do we actually identify the aspect of one's own self? How does one identify that part which is one's collective self, which is where as an individual we meet the rest of the creation, and where, as an individual, we recognize our union with the rest of the creation. So that's really what we were nailing down in the last set of webinars, knowing the inside tribe. And we spent a lot of time, if we have this understanding of the manifested self, from unmanifested being up through the physical material part of the self, and that in there it's a smooth continuum, right? But we've subdivided to 8 levels, that if we go into these deep, very abstract levels of being or of consciousness, this is where we find the point where we stop identifying ourselves as individual and separate from everything, and we recognize ourselves as manifestation of everything. We recognize all that which has been identified as outside myself is actually myself. So that's what we did in the last webinar. This webinar is all about how we establish or forge an intimate relationship with that part of one's own self. How do we get in and get to know ourselves in such an intimate and loving and incredibly luscious way that it becomes very, very fluid and very easy to work with the junction between individuality and totality. And working with that junction, then one is able to harness or utilize all those laws of nature and all the details, all the functions, all the qualities that act as a foundation for specific manifestations, for specific healing, for specific knowledge. So, okay, so I made this outline. I've got lots of notes here, all about what I was going to talk tonight. But about an hour ago, almost exactly an hour ago, something really exciting happened. In addition to the fact that Nick showed up. And that is that I was enjoying the feeling of getting ready for this webinar when I had such a clear, concrete experience of what the essence or the being of the web of life. It was as if the web of life came and kind of like sat with me. And I was like, it's you, the being of everything, that part of creation that connects everything to everything. And you're here with me, like, you're here sitting with me like a companion. And it was such a wonderful feeling. It's still here with me. And so I now offer that because I knew that it came because of you. I knew it became itself because all of you were going to be joining me tonight in this webinar. And as the old saying from the Vedas go, he who is awakened self, the knowledge, the riches, the impulses of intelligence, seek him out. So in preparation for tonight's webinar and in preparation for the privilege of being the reporter of what's going on tonight, I had the opportunity to have this wonderful experience. And I don't really know why it's come or how it intends to unfold tonight, but I am absolutely confident that the fact that we're all sitting together is going to allow that to unfold. So let us begin. What I'm doing is so like I said, this web of life, this crystal grid, sometimes it's called, that connects everything to everything, I feel is sitting with us like a presence. It has its own presence of being. And it's interesting that this presence of being has a quality of really, really deep devotion. Now, this idea of devotion ties into tonight's topic, and it was also one of the points in my notes. And that is that excuse me, we're making an adjustment in the group. I'll tell you about the devotion in just a second. have this healing coming into the group. So what's happening is, for each person in tonight's webinar, live, and for everyone who watches it in the future, this presence of the web of life is speaking its nature to everyone listening. It is like as if you could say introducing itself. We know that the web of life is a part of ourself, right? Essentially, the web of life is an extension of the entire astral through collective level of the physiology. At least that's where I locate it. I locate it within the context of these three levels. Even a little bit, it goes up into the emotional level of the physiology, a little bit. But speaking the language of silence. So it's a silent communication, but it is expressing familiarity. It is, these are the flows. These are, the language is the universal language of perception and experience, but I'm the interpreter. So I'm translating for everybody. So there's first feeling is the feeling of deep, deep familiarity, like intimate familiarity. The other thing that's communicating is there's a kind of a exquisite bliss associated with the forging of this relationship. And there is love. There is a love which is so tender. It is so eternal. It is so true that I'm having difficulty finding words to describe it. But I would say that the love is the most prevalent element in this particular communication. And this is coming through directly into everybody's physiology who's here sitting, and it's moving through these areas right here. The emotional, astral, causal, and collective levels of the physiology, and a little bit down into the celestial level of physiology. So I'm enjoying the feeling of the presence of the web of life with all of us, within all of us, within you, within all of us. It is structure of your own nature. It's like the eternal mother, sort of. It's like protective, the web. It's like a net. Think of it as a safety net. Anyway, I would like to get back to this point about devotion because I think it's important at this point. And that is that as individuals, we are constantly radiating something into our environment. With whatever we're thinking, whatever we're feeling, whatever it is, it's coming through our own beings and it's kind of going out there into the environment. However, it's an important thing to know that what we radiate moves in two directions at the same time, because every impulse of intelligence that's produced within you moves both toward the denser levels of creation where it shatters in a sense. It becomes like, I was thinking of that concept of shards of a broken mirror. That's a Bashar concept, but this concept of shards of a broken mirror, that everything that we project out of ourselves goes out into the environment and it hits against every little object in the environment, and then from each object in the environment it reflects back. So we get these little pieces. I get the quality of the sound as it bounces off my microphone and then comes back to me, and then it bounces off the speakers and it comes back, and it bounces off the screen and it comes back like that, and then that goes out into infinity. So what happens is these little shards are coming back to us all the time. of every little thing that comes out of our being and radiates out into the environment. Meanwhile, everything you create also falls into the field of pure, infinite being and awareness. And when it goes in that direction, it gains completion and fulfillment. So what happens is whatever we're radiating, it falls into the field of pure being, and it is multiplied to infinity, and it is refined, and it is completed, and it reaches fulfillment, and it experiences itself as totality. So we have these two different effects taking place at the same time every time a communication is expressed. And that doesn't matter whether the communication is expressed in a really dense way, if it's just nonverbal communication, if it's just a deep, deep feeling that's communicated only through your silence. It doesn't matter. They all move in this particular way. I'm seeing the two flows integrating. They're integrating. That means every impulse of intelligence as it flows from your being out into that web of life, into the web of life. The web of life moves it in both directions at the same time. So the web of life has this ability, like a bridge. Think of it like a bridge, that it connects the source of creation to the manifested world. And it experiences every impulse of intelligence, both as infinite fragments and as an integrated wholeness. It's very beautiful. The parts and the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. There's another side of that. That's an SCI saying. Okay. Right. Okay, so all right. So, falling in love with divine being. Ultimately, falling in love with divine being is about falling in love with ourselves. And with divine being, falling in love with itself. Because each of us, whatever we do, is really just the being of the whole creation interacting with itself. So, this topic at hand is about forging better communication, better inner communication. It's also about evolving and developing the ability to handle deeper, more intense, more profound, more meaningful communication. It's about being comfortable with greater authenticity and truth. And this is so essential right now because, as my adult children have been pointing out to me, right now there is a big shift in the way we find truth at the dense material level of creation. There's a big transformation in the way we obtain information. And the traditional means are really no longer used. Not very many people listen to radio. Spotify maybe. MP3s, but not radio. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's been a big shift. There's been a lot of the money has been poured or sunk into certain, channels through which we obtain information, and the whole thing is kind of out the window right now. Alternative news is just as far-reaching and as powerful as mainstream media, in a lot of cases more. So what that means for us as individuals is that in this healing session, we're going to go in and clarify the channels of communication in such a way as to open yet deeper and more reliable sources of information for everyone, for all of us. And that means the web of life being it's kind of like our anchor in this process. So the first thing I'd like to say is I'm seeing an activation of really deep gratitude between individuality and the web of life. This is from the level of the celestial and collective level of the physiology, that resonation of deepest, most sincere gratitude that this is what we are creating tonight. The next thing is that the thread that ties or connects us all into the web of life, and that it is one of the fundamental features or qualities of that level of being, is devotion. And it's no surprise, because we're talking in tonight's webinar about falling in love, and devotion is the most exalted form of love, because it's the combination of love and service, the combination of action, love applied. Devotion is applied love. That means something that is so abstract and so tender is made concrete and finds a way to be. It finds a way to express within the range of the human condition and human experience. I'm also having a moment of organizing here because more information is coming in. I would like to share a piece of information with everybody that needs to integrate into this picture that we're kind of drawing a picture of the connection between the source. Oh, look, there's a source up there, and then all the streams and all the expressions, and it goes back to the source at the other end. And this is what I would like to show you right now. This is important. This is what happens before anything manifests. This is where the first communication resides, the deepest communication. It's very important for all of us. This is important for you. This is important for all of us as we're moving ahead as a race, even, that we all become proficient and familiar. We all remember that we've been speaking the language of perception and experience forever, since the beginnings of manifestation. This is the language that carries from the most primordial beginnings of the whole universe to the formation of the planets and stars, to the eventual formation of this galaxy, and with all of its stars and planets, and with all the beings on all the planets in the Goldilocks zone, and all the beings that live in the other zones too. And I mean, there's one language that binds us. And it's important that we get familiar with this language. It's very important for what's coming up in this webinar, because what we're going to do is we're going to use what we evolve in the first part of the webinar to then self-interact in the second part of the webinar in order to very capably, in a very profound way, restructure ourselves so that we are, how can I say, like, we start to rise up as sort of cosmic citizens, if you will. So the language, when the language is spoken, it moves in both directions at the same time. What that means is that our awareness then has a channel open whereby it can examine the communication from the densest level of what we were intending to say at the surface through the finer levels. At the surface, it's broken apart like at the shards of the mirror, and then at the finer levels into the source of creation, where it's a wholeness of expression. It's a one single unified feeling, and that feeling is devotion. That feeling is devotion. How it expresses, how it manifests, breaks apart into a zillion infinite pieces. But the source is devotion. The source is devotion. And as I'm saying that word devotion, I feel as if I'm getting a read on everybody's physiology and doing physiological checks on everyone. And at the same time, offering what I'm seeing back to the source of creation and to the web of life, which is the connector. Oh, I love that the web of life is the connector. We have to go back to this point about source to source with the in-betweensy parts. This is an important point, that before anything manifests, before any communication fully manifests, what happens is divine being. This is where because we need to find out who we're falling in love with, right? In this webinar, we're falling in love with divine being. So who is this divine being that we're falling in love with? Who is this? What is this? What is this aspect of myself that is unmanifest and I can't find it and I don't know who it is? It needs nothing. It does not need to manifest, but it wants to manifest. It is the silent source of everything that exists, and it knows itself. When I say we know divine being, what I really mean is divine being knows itself through us. So how does divine being know itself? It knows itself by creating a commentary on itself. It creates its own commentary. It folds in on its awareness, right? This is energy healing. We direct awareness or attention intelligently. Divine being directs intelligence to itself. It directs intelligence to itself. It directs its own nature into its own self. So it's knowing itself. So it is knowingness, knowing itself. I've said this a lot of times. I know I've said this a lot of times, but we're going to unfold it a little differently. It's the same thing. We're just unfolding it differently every time, because every time we unfold it a slightly different angle, then we understand it better, right? So it's gonna make a commentary on itself. And as it does that, it expresses itself. It expresses what it sees. So that infinite unexpressed value of creation becomes expressed. We are that expression. So the Croatian waterfalls are that expression. Everything is that expression. Everything. Hi, Mike. So what we're looking at is this great big infinite unbounded field of just unmanifest wholeness, which is very abstract and very hard to define. But now we have 2 points of definition. We have the point of its non-manifestness, and then we have the point of the definition where it's defined itself. So there's a definition, and then that compares to the non-definition. We can look at them this way too if you prefer. But we have, in other words, 2 points within a field of just pure, infinite, unbounded ocean of non-definedness. We now have 2 defined points. And when you have 2 defined points, what happens is awareness can move back and forth between them. Now we can look at this in terms of the things that I have repeated on many previous occasions regarding the nature of our manifest self, that it goes from unmanifest being up to defined physical manifest self. So we've got the same 2 points. We can also look at these points this way, that we've got this source of creation, which is infinite, unbounded, unmanifest, and then we've got the expressed level of self. And what happens is awareness can move back and forth between these 2 defined points. This is what our communication is doing, right? That the impulse of intelligence comes out, and then it reverberates back and forth like that. It reverberates back and forth between that which is not expressed, which is not manifest, and that which is manifest. And when it's in that which is not, it is complete. And when it is in that which is manifest, it's broken into a zillion, billion, trillion, infinite number of shards. But this shard area is the way that we catalog, define, and understand the wholeness. This is important. This is important. We define and understand that which is indefinable and not able to be understood by the intellect. And that relationship is a love relationship. And when the awareness is constantly bouncing back and forth, you wouldn't be sitting in your physical body, in your living room, looking at your computer right now if your awareness wasn't moving back and forth between those points at infinite speed, because it is the movement of awareness back and forth between those points at infinite speed that is responsible for the manifestation of literally everything we call our world. So it's kind of a given that the awareness is already moving back and forth. But the cool part is that when it moves, when the awareness moves back and forth, there's kind of like a little friction, like a little circle of energy that's created in there. And that friction or circle of energy is kind of like it's a center where intelligence vibrates, where feelings can resonate. It's like a seed. That friction creates a kind of a little loop that's like a little seed of manifestation. And that little seed is where, with conscious mind, with intention, with intelligence, we can intelligently plop an intention. You can plop a feeling or an intention or an idea into that circle where that friction is taking place. And the friction is alive with the elements necessary to give rise to the manifestation. So at this time, what I understood, and this is from a long, long period, it really, I mean, honestly, for me, it probably goes back to 1980, is understanding that the conscious intention that's dropped into that point where that seed of creation and the friction is devotion. It has to be, because it is the devotion that allows everything in creation to unfold in a way which is completely life-supporting, which is transforming in an evolutionary way, which allows that which has gone out of alignment with nature and out of alignment with the will of God, if you will, or out of alignment with cosmic evolution, it brings it back. Devotion does it. And devotion is a kind of a common, you could say it is a foundational resonation behind or underneath every valuable communication. Every relationship, even the relationship between one's own self, that we know ourself as our human self and our minds and our emotions and our intellects and so forth, and the aspect of our own self, which is so difficult to define, the abstract aspect of self, the collective aspect of self, the web of life. That's a living thing, that web of life. It is our own self. In order to be able to comfortably allow our devotion, this is now, I'm just reading off the group right now, in order for our devotion to be able to comfortably interface with the web of life, it's necessary to get a little more comfortable with ourselves. Because everybody has something about themselves that they're not 100% comfortable with. Everybody has something about themselves that they think, oh, well, that's not perfect. And these wrinkles. I guess they're perfect. They wouldn't be there if they weren't perfect, I guess. But everybody has something. I never had braces. It goes beyond that. Balance and orderliness are flowing into the collective right now. I think we did some balance and orderliness at the last webinar, but it's good that we're doing more. Because what's happening this year is a breaking down or a deconstruction, demolishing of a lot of the familiar systems that we've worked with for a very, very long time in order to rebirth or regrow a more efficient, more effective, more powerful means of functioning. And that means increased order and balance. So right now, before we get to that point, before we get to the death and the destruction, we just are going to create order right now. By doing so, it's going to smooth out the path before us as we move into the field. Oh, I love you guys. What I appreciate about what's happening right now is that we're at the point in the webinar where we're past all the notes and we're really kind of flying free. It's my favorite part because I don't know what's coming up next, but I'm sure it's good. So we're speaking, our physiologies are speaking in that universal language, orderliness and balance to the web of life. The web of life, when it came to sit with me tonight, it had this quality to it that reminded me of like organic. It reminded me of something organic, something earthy, something like that holds in common to all things. So that even includes like animals and plants and stones and everything. It includes forms of creation which do not fully embody totality. There you go. There's the imperfect. Do not fully embody totality. And I'm feeling a wave of awareness moving down into the concept of does not fully embody totality. And there's a quality of love and devotion that moves even into these forms, even into these incomplete forms. Like a mother, you know, and it's like, well, my child isn't fully grown up yet, so I don't know what kind of a person they're going to become. They don't fully embody totality yet. Someday this will be a great man, or this will be a great woman, or a sweet person, or a good person, or a nice person, or an enlightened person, or whatever, awakened person. But right now, they are just struggling with learning that they can't always be first, or whatever. So. Children. So the mother loves anyway. So we have the privilege in this webinar of moving into, and this is a privilege, moving into aspects or structures of creation, which are, some of them are fully manifested, so you could say like people and things and so, but some of them are not fully manifested. Some of them are structures or life forms of creation which are sitting at deeper levels of being, which are incomplete, which represent like lack of fulfillment. It's a privilege to witness how the shards of creation distribute themselves. That's what we're doing. We're looking at the shards, the incomplete pieces of wholeness. And they're fascinating because they all offer an angle on wholeness or totality. They all show infinity, but just from like a specific angle, like glasses that are purple, so there's only purple or something like that. And we're going into this area, and it's possible to fathom into this area of the shards. That means all the life force and all the beings of creation through the web of life. The web of life is offering us safe passage. We are receiving a gift right now that we normally, and in the past, I have never experienced this. This is the gift of safe passage into areas that normally would be not safe, or normally could be places you wouldn't want to go. But tonight we want to go there. So as we're moving in and feeling into this sort of these deep locations, like animal energies, lots of animal energies. I'm feeling energy starting to move and swirl a little bit. So I'm feeling that little seed where the swirling energy, the little fire, the little friction, ball of friction and fire is there. The primordial light, we could think of it more of a light than a fire maybe. And this light, it's almost like some kind of a cosmic vehicle in which we are able to move into areas of great disorder, chaos, areas of chaos. And as we move into these areas of chaos, they are absolutely fascinating, absolutely beautiful, absolutely filled with a quality of life force, which is there's a source, okay? We're going into a source of life force. Unlike sources of life force that we've experienced before, these sources are pulling together opposites. Just like when infinite, unbounded, unmanifest being comments on itself, it creates commentary on its own nature. The commentary becomes a defined thing. So now you've got non-defined, understood in terms of definition. So these are like opposites. When we get the opposites together, like a paradox, and you get a paradox going, then you have forms that work together to create pure energy. So I feel as if we're coming into an area of understanding in energy healing that has to do with creation of pure energy. Pure energy from nothing. It's a massive, massive energy source. The web of life itself is a massive life force. As we are sort of like embraced in the comfort and the sweetness of the web of life, which is always around us anyway. We're always in a big hug. We're always engaged in a big hug with the source with the web of life. But right now, there's a feeling of this established feeling at the celestial and cause and collective levels of being we are incredibly safe. We are flowing on the wings of, or on the channel, in the channel of devotion. So we are functioning out of pure devotion. And we're moving into areas that normally would be considered sort of super chaotic and very sort of broken apart, broken down also. And as we're moving into these areas, I'm seeing how discordant feelings evolve out of the shards, out of the spots where okay, imagine I was holding up a piece of a mirror. I'm going to hold up my notebook here. Okay, imagine this is a piece of a mirror, okay? So there's a point where within the context of the mirror, you get a whole picture. But right at the edges, there's a really acute, like super hypersensitivity to the fact that it's not complete. So outside the mirror is totality. It may be unmanifest being, or it could be other shards of other mirrors or whatever, but the point that's really difficult or challenging is the edge. This is the part that hurts, and this is the area or the point from where all the discordance, all the sense of being separate from wholeness occurs at these edges here. Does that make sense? Now, of course, what we're doing in this webinar is we're looking at this. I'm holding up my notebook, which is being the commentary on what's actually happening at a deeper, more abstract level of creation. But we're living it. We're going through this living field of life around us to touch into this body of creation where there are all these pieces or segments of reality that reflect back on us. And everything is our own creation. Everything has been created, self-created, really. Divine being has self-created through us. We are the vehicle. Everyone is a vehicle. Every piece. Those edges, because they are the significant point that we're looking at, are the areas that require our attention. So now the healing, we're going to go into, I'm looking. What awareness is doing, what the awareness of divine being is doing, is it's lighting up the edges. Oh, I guess I need my mirror again. So we imagine that there's like a light. You can kind of see it if I bend my book a little bit, right? You can see it's like, it's lighting up the edges just like that. It's so cool. Who would have thought this composition book, that all the edges are lit up with the light of being. And of course, there's the dark edges. They're really dark edges, right? Because that's where the discordant feelings evolve out or manifest out. All the illusion and all the discord and all the despair and the sense of chaos. And I'm kind of reading into the collective consciousness right now. You know, all those feelings come from the dark edges. So awareness goes in and starts to light up those edges so they're illuminated and we can see what we're looking at. And as the edges of the shards light up, they themselves form a kind of a web, kind of a matrix, you could say, because they all connect to each other. So being is like shining through the cracks between the shards. That's what it looks like. And as divine being shines through the shards, it's recognizing itself as that web of life. And the web of life exists within our bodies. This is where we get to the part, this was the second half of tonight's meeting, where it's important that we restructure ourselves now. We need to restructure our physiologies so that we can meet the changes that are coming forward right now and that are coming forward this year with grace and strength and integrity and all the resources necessary to kind of traverse the process, to move through the process in a way that results in maximum expression of divine intention, maximum expression of your full potential. What we're dealing with is, it's interesting how this webinar is really an extension of the last webinar. In the last webinar, we talked so much about the collective level of being, or of the self. In this webinar, I can see that what we're really doing is we're kind of moving into slightly more manifest levels of the expression of consciousness. And like up here, remember I was saying how the collective level of self looks like a fabric, right? Made of these little threads of light. Well, that's a lot like the web of life, right? The web of life is a kind of fabric, but the web of life is more what your being or your physiology looks like as it manifests up into these more middle levels of self. Even at the intellectual level, you can kind of take a string or a stream of logic. You can take a piece of information from point to point to point like that. So that's like following a thread. But we're looking at them also at these deeper levels. And what I'm seeing is something that looks a little bit, what's being destroyed are these roots, these deep knotted forms of creation that are the dark edges of the shards of creation, where they're a kind of a spawning ground for discord in the physiology. And what we're doing in this energy healing webinar is we're healing everybody's physiology from that level of the self. So that means looking into the body and finding the way in which the web of life manifests in the physiology as that sort of, as like a kind of a matrix of nadis or of meridians in the physiology. And I've been getting a lot of downloads about this over the last few weeks, so I inferred that meant that this information is necessary and useful for this particular webinar. And so what I found, I'm just sharing with you some of the information that I got. These channels, these subtle channels through which consciousness flows in the physiology, in many cases align with the channels through which other physical structures flow, like the channels through which the blood flows, and the channels through which the nervous system flows, and the channels through which the whole lymphatic system and the endocrine system. And so we've got all these different systems, the digestive system. These are like channels through which intelligence is flowing through the body. And where these physical channels flow, so also flow energetic channels. Of course, the nadis, they get very, 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 very fine. But, you know, there's some, I understand there's some like little, you know, threads of nerves that are like down to single cells, you know, a line of single cells, or little tiny, tiny capillaries at the very edges of the skin that are just like little tiny little threads like that. The nadis get even smaller than that. They go down inside the cells. They go down to subcellular, molecular, atomic, subatomic levels. They get very, very fine. But even at those levels, even inside the cell, if you look at a diagram of what a cell looks like, you'll see there are all these little areas where intelligence is flowing inside the cell. So that was the first thing, is that these channels, they line up with the channels of flow inside the physiology. The next thing, and this has to do with the topic of tonight's webinar, which is love, is that the endocrine system plays a fundamental role in the relationship between our desire and intention and the direction in which people's, you know, interests flow, and the ability to manifest. The endocrine system. So we're going to just take a moment now, and I'm offering to everyone to take a moment, and what we're going to do is we're going to find the pituitary gland. Now, inside the brain, you know, our whole body is bilaterally symmetrical. So the brain has, you know, nodes on both sides, and a lot of the little organs inside of the brain have two parts. However, the pineal gland and the pituitary gland are single players inside the brain because they're right smack in the middle. So the pituitary gland is right up in the center of the brain. It's really, really right, more even in the center than the pineal gland, because the pineal gland is kind of back, but the pituitary gland is more forward and down. It's right about there. Like if you make a line, let's see, up from your ear, just in front of your ear, just slightly, maybe toward the front edge of the ear and up, and go like that, you'll find your pituitary gland. And that is the master administrator of all the endocrine system. Just taking a moment to intelligently direct our attention to that part of the physiology. Anytime we put our attention directly on some specific part of the physiology, that part of the physiology just loves it. It loves it. Your pituitary gland is like, oh, thank you for recognizing me. Thank you for finding me. Thank you for putting your attention on me. Pituitary gland spends its whole life serving the physiology in a state of pure devotion. And why is it able to get all the other glands in the body are much larger, to get them to do what it wants? Because it approaches with deference, because it approaches with such appreciation, such love, such willingness to do whatever is required to support balance and understanding and health and success. A deeper level of balance is taking place in the physiology between the three main energy centers, the head, the heart, and the gut. So this was important. When we speak of devotion, we're generally speaking of a heart-centered experience or activity. But the reality is that all the parts, and this is where we tie in, we're tying in with the web of life here, is that the web of life has this capability of connecting literally everything and not looking upon any part of the creation as less or more than any other part. So this, it's helping to clear, this is for the ancestors, or clearing a lot of judgments and like, I want to say analysis, assumptions, clearing assumptions, judgments, expectations, of course, go with that, attachments, attachments go with the assumptions. Anyway, this is clearing from the nervous system, from the ancestors. It's going back through the ancestral lines. I'm counting. It looks like we're going back about 1,000 years, almost 1,000 years. Looks like 900, 960, somewhere around there. Different numbers of ancestors for different of us. But the nervous system is restructuring. I wasn't expecting that. I thought we were working with the endocrine system, right? What happened? No. Anyway. You guys are doing this. Your divine being is running the show, not me. So thank you for allowing me the privilege. And as that happens, oh, this is nice. As that happens, this very kind of organic, earthy, very familiar, very, there's a lusciousness or a sumptuousness about the personality or the quality of being of the web of life. And that is communicating to the ancestors. Their nervous systems needed to make an upgrade in order for them to receive and accept this perception or understanding of this aspect of themselves, but also of their collective self, of themselves as manifested as collective self, collective being. This is important. It's so interesting. There's like an activation of the web of life within your ancestral archive, within our ancestral archives. It's literally like the web of life is moving in and it is saying, I am you. I am you. And it's connecting all the it's like knitting all the ancestors together. They're having this like awakening experience, the ancestors. Thank God. Thank goodness that their nervous systems are refining so they can do this thing. But the awakening is that they're recognizing their own collective reality. They're recognizing their collective reality. And of course, that happening in the archive of the ancestors means that's happening at the molecular level of our physiologies, in the DNA. The DNA is recognizing its reality as collective. And that recognition is an impulse that we are creating in our own bodies at the molecular level in every cell in the body. So what that means is that recognition is radiating like you're like a beacon, and it's radiating out of you both to the dense levels of creation where it breaks into infinite shards of the mirror and into the wholeness of creation where it experiences total fulfillment, where it is multiplied to infinity, where it is refined and completed and returned to the physiology, through the crown of the head, into the brain, into the pituitary gland. Oh, this is where the pituitary gland ties in. Well, okay. And into the pituitary gland, and speaking to that, this is that language of perception and experience, that completion, refinement, and upliftment of that impulse of intelligence in your own being that's radiating from your being at a molecular level is coming back into the body and is speaking to the pituitary gland. Good for the attention to be there. For those of you with your hand chakras, if you want to use those, you can. For me, I don't really want to get it too close. I kind of like them out here. You gotta see where it feels right. But I can feel from the palms of my hands, I can feel into my pituitary gland. Oh, there it is. Okay. So I'm acting like a tuning fork. The intelligence is making a continuous loop. It is at the molecular level of the physiology, integrating the perception, understanding, and comprehension of one's own self as collective, and at the same time, that is radiating like you're a beacon. It's radiating from every cell in your body, every DNA molecule in your body, to the whole of creation, and being returned to your physiology through the crown of the head into the pituitary gland. And the pituitary gland is getting very enlivened and healed and balanced. And this is creating balance in the endocrine system. It's also creating strength in the endocrine system. A lot of the functions of the physiology are dependent upon hormones, including digestion. Evidently, some hormones are actually involved in the digestive process through the pancreas. Self-acceptance is the result of this process, because at a collective level of society, one of our biggest challenges as humans, and one of our biggest challenges at this time in society, is our acceptance of some of our earthier qualities, right? I'm on a public webinar, so I'm not going to I'm not going to use any naughty words, but I'm going to say that we're clearing many, many layers. It's a good thing we've got our ancestors online here through the ancestral lines, but also through certain previous incarnations of everyone in the webinar. We've had these attitudes towards our sexuality, towards desire in general. Like, there's a lot of discordant feelings of like guilt and shame and not deserving, and somehow there's something wrong with feelings that are very passionate, and remorse, and an identification that underneath all that, as that's clearing, and that's clearing from the endocrine system. It's also clearing from the etheric body. It's also clearing from the whole pelvis and the, you know, the sort of lower abdomen region, also from some of the other organs down in that area, glands down in that organ area. Underneath that is clearing the illusion that it's only a kind of an animalistic, sort of earthy, kind of small-minded, kind of autonomic nervous system kind of function, is the whole level of the self that we associate with passion and intimacy and like that. I'm finding my metaphors, everybody. Sex. Anyway, everything has its reality within the context of the individual physiology, but everything has its reality in the context of universal reality. So there is an honorable side to all that. There is an honorable aspect of that we can think of in terms of goddess energy. We're trying, as a society, we're trying to kind of find our way around it, right? So we've got the whole goddess energy thing kind of going, but then that becomes the whole women's lib movement, and then, then everything goes out the window, because when you get to the women's lib movement, then all of a sudden there's this separation that's occurring in society, and then you've got the people that are politically correct on one side, and you've got the people who want freedom of speech on the other, and they're fighting with each other, and it just becomes a big nasty mess. So we need to get way past that. We need to get way past this is obviously, we found an edge, a nice sharp edge, where there's a separation of a feeling between individuality and universality. There's a separation. It seems like there's certain aspects of the human condition associated with birth and conception and desire and so forth, which has been so linked, so deeply linked to sin and things that are taboo and so forth, that it's not easily reconciled. So I'm just asking, I'm asking in through. When I say asking, I'm feeling a feeling of my being that has an underlying foundation. We are, thank you, everybody's helping, thank you, I love you guys. Couldn't work if it was just me asking by myself, right? Foundation of devotion. And then under that is, how do we heal? How do we heal this structure in creation so that as it manifests to the superficial level of creation, it comes out in a way which expresses divine intention with perfection? They say there's no perfection in the relative. But you know, there are a lot of things in the relative that come darn close to perfection. There really are. My buddy Nick is one of them. Anyway. What I'm seeing happening, remember I said before that divine being was lighting up those edges around the shards, around the pieces of incompleted forms of creation. Well, the light is taking on a specific flavor. It's a very, very, very delicate, tender like a newborn baby, delicate like a female infant baby. Even when they're tiny infants, the little boys tend to sometimes come out all, bouncy. They're all different. They're all different. But this tenderness, it's so fine. The light is shining on that edge so very, very fine. Very, like almost shining sort of muted, because the edge itself represents a quality of unfulfilled desire. That the unfulfilled desire itself has a kind of a preciousness about it. And so when the light shines there, it doesn't want to completely obliterate the darkness. It doesn't want to completely obliterate the edge. It wants to honor the edge. It's like when you're walking the razor's edge, it needs to be done ever so carefully. Okay, I'm just going to report what I'm seeing because it doesn't make huge sense to me, but I'm sure you guys will get it. So one of the things that I'm seeing happening is there is a release, a physical release of toxins taking place in the brain, very much around the area of the pituitary, but also a little deeper in an area known as the midbrain, and it has a more technical name that I can't think of right now, but it's the area where we find the substantia nigra and the ventral tegmental area of the brain. And these two structures, the substantia nigra and the VTA, you can call it, are responsible for producing neurochemicals that are connected to and associated with extremely blissful experience, extremely luscious, extremely physically satisfying, amazing experience. And it's flushing. It's flushing. It's a very, very, very fine, delicate. I mean, we're talking about organs inside the brain like this big, like little, and then there are little, tiny little threads that come out from them, little nadis and little, threads of nerves that come out from them that allow the neurochemicals to move through the whole system. It goes right past the pituitary gland and definitely is intimately connected to the whole endocrine process, the whole hormonal structure processes and structures in the body. And it's cleansing. It's cleansing. And I'm seeing physical toxins cleansing. In a lot of the people in this webinar, I'm seeing heavy metals cleansing from this part of the head. I am inferring from what I'm seeing, and I see we're at our time too, but I'm inferring from what I'm seeing that the bodies, our physical bodies, may experience a little purification over the next could be day or something. I mean, I'm actually, even as I'm speaking, I'm feeling a little bit of a buildup of mucus in here. And of course, because of the blood-brain barrier, that's how the brain lets go of toxins, right? So the toxins are being released. The balance, I'm just doing a quick review, balance between the 3 energy centers of the body, the head, the heart, and the gut area. This purification that's occurring up here is actually speaking to the microbial level of the physiology, and it's communicating a very fundamental change in the soup of the body. And so this is providing, this shift that's taking place in this purification is providing a foundation for a more sophisticated, higher level. Oh, thank you. Yes, somebody has, darling, has said limbic system and basal ganglia. Yes, I was thinking of an area a little bit smaller than the limbic system, kind of includes the whole area. Basal ganglia, yes. I was thinking of a word that actually starts with an M, but basal ganglia is right in that area. Thank you. That helps. I suggest that everyone give a big thank you to your pituitary gland for the role that it played in today's healing session. And softest, most loving thank you to the web of life, which holds us ever in its embrace and connects us ever to everything, and is the very life of all connections inside the body. And this sort of organic earthiness that is responsible for the quality of what I feel to be the personality of the web of life, or at least some defining characteristic of it, because it's this totally abstract thing, is intimately connected to the nature of the intelligence of the endocrine system. So this endocrine system is up for a big upgrade. And I would expect, I mean, I'm inferring, but I'm thinking that as we're going on today into tomorrow, God bless all of you who are on the subscription program, and hopefully will be joining me tomorrow as well. We're going to take probably a deeper look at this relationship with our own endocrine system and continued upgrade of that part of the physiology. All right. I've kept everybody past time just a bit. It's hard to stop sometimes because there's so much good stuff that we're doing, and it's such an incredible opportunity for me to do this work with all of you. And everybody should know, by the way, that these webinars are growing. They're about double right now of what they were about half a year ago. So, you know, it's nice that we're getting larger numbers, and the growth seems to be really organic. So that's going to continue, which means the webinars continue to become more powerful. And so I would like to send out a very big thank you to all of you for participating in these webinars with me, because it is way exciting. And we are doing absolutely cutting edge, right at the forefront work in the field of energy healing. And we are doing it together. You guys are doing it. I can't do it without you. And I suppose it wouldn't be as interesting without me up here being the mouth. So I have to guess. Anyway, I love doing it. Thank you. So I'm going to close the session. Thank you, everyone, for being with me in this session. It's been incredible, and I'm really looking forward to using tonight's work as a foundation for tomorrow. And I look forward to sharing the recordings with everyone and hearing from you. Thank you so much. Please let me know anything I can do. I'm open to suggestions. Thank you. Good night.